We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. I am your host today, Brandon Clift, and today's guest is the founder of the Tailored Quill, Taylor Wilkins. Now, Taylor is a life and purpose coach who has over a decade of work in crisis, mental health management and treatment, and has guided over 10,000 people through some of the most challenging experiences in life. Now, Taylor has a unique approach to his coaching, which is offering the depth of long-term therapy, but packaging it in a short-term coaching format, which helps his clients define their unique purpose and then take actionable steps to live it out. Now, I know what you're thinking, another life coach out there, another young, handsome dude just telling people how to live their lives. Look, I can tell you right now, having occupied this space for a long time, having been a coach, and having met hundreds of so-called life coaches, you can trust this man and what he's about to share and teach you in this episode as we dive into the most common mistakes that people make when they're trying to achieve great things. You know, the reverse approach to personal development, which helps people stick to their goals. You know, the importance of taking on challenges in life, but making sure that we clean house before doing so. Like Taylor has this really cool approach to go, yes, you want to achieve X, Y, Z, and sure, we can talk about your goals, but first, we need to know how you got here. We need to know all the stories, all the narratives, all the basic energies that have been at play to help you identify who you are in this very moment. Only then, once we know you, the hero, can we identify the journey that you're about to take. We also dive into how a sense of uniqueness, right? Me, I am only one of one, could also be the source of a lot of misery and challenge in life. And also why you don't have to be passionate about what you do for a living. Why you don't have to have passion, purpose, and everything, including the kitchen sink, tied to how you make money. And how just working a job that doesn't necessarily spark the fire inside of you can still be incredibly fulfilling and make all your other passion projects possible. So I believe you're going to get a lot of value out of this interview. Taylor has been a longtime friend of mine. I believe he's one of the best out there who occupies this space in kind of the life and purpose coaching space. And I believe at the end of this interview, you're going to find a little bit more clarity as to how you want to approach your next goal in life or your next challenges, or have a better understanding of the person you see in the mirror. And lastly, a little nod to Taylor. This podcast would not be here if it weren't for Taylor helping me identify that my purpose in life is to express myself, to create environments and put myself in situations where I can do that. So with all of that and knowing a little bit more about Taylor, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Taylor Wilkins. Enjoy. Taylor Wilkins, my friend, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, mate. It's been a journey, our friendship, and we've converged and diverged over the years in our time since meeting in Salt Lake City a couple of years back, and it's just been fantastic to not only be a friend, but also to have both work together in a professional capacity and to now see the work that you're doing with your clients. It's absolutely amazing. So before we dive into what we're going to be talking about today, take a moment for those who haven't heard of you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Thank you. Well, firstly, Brandon, even though it feels like we've known each other for 10 years, it's only been like 3. And equally, I've seen you go through so much in the past 3 years too, your own personal and professional journey, that it's been really cool to just be in like parallel canoes on like on wild rivers, you know, and just be able to watch you go through all of it as well. So it's good to see you again, and good to be here. Yeah, so my name's Taylor, and my entire career has been in crisis mental health. I started my career primarily with teens and kids who were either suicidal or wanted to be suicidal or were self-harming or otherwise in emotional crisis. And so they would come into the residential program I was working in, and for lack of better words, we would kind of blast them with a bunch of structure and a ton of therapeutic interventions, and to be a short-term program. And what was really powerful about it was that those kids were there because they either had they had the choice to, make the unhealthy choice of either harming themselves in some way or finally getting treatment. They're at that crisis point. And so because everything was in crisis and it was fresh, and it was like the wound was fresh, and they needed help right then, I developed an approach that helped them not only understand how they came to this point in their lives, but also the fact that there's another future that's possible for them that they couldn't see in those binary terms. And I was really successful with that. And so worked in a bunch of residential programs, several hospitals, working with similar populations, and then started my own company, which I still run today, which is called the Tailored Quill. And it's named that just to help people find the real story, the true story of their lives, and express it confidently. Because so many people think that their lives can only and should only be one way. And so it's my true joy and it's my true purpose to bring them peace by showing them that life can look different and they can have more volition over it, and it can be more fulfilling. So a lot of it is helping people define their life purpose. A lot of it, of course, is helping people rewrite limiting beliefs in their minds, deconditioning a lot of stuff they've learned in their lives, and just helping them overcome a lot of overwhelm, burnout, existential dread, and their version of crisis.
Amazing. Well, I tell you, and for those listening, we've all met life coaches, right? Those that are out there to save the world and save people's lives. And, life is pretty big pill and a big topic to approach. And so naturally, I've always approached those folks with skepticism. I've been like, the most common skeptic thought is like, what can you teach me about life? Right. And when people ask me about you, or when people are looking for some guidance in life and I talk to them about you, the easiest way I can sum it up to them is like, just make the call. Just call. You'll trust me. You will know once you speak with him that you can trust him, because you're a young fellow like me, but you've taken many trips around this earth to get to where you are. I think that awareness, having worked with at-risk youth, knowing what the valleys look like, that's what I believe gives you the gift and the ability to frame what the peaks can be for them, and help them understand that. So for those listening, put your skepticism aside. This is a dude who has been through the trenches and knows his stuff through and through. So not just another life coach coming in to talk about purpose and passion and all that stuff. Goal setting and unicorns and rainbows. No, we are, this is like feet on the ground, grounded stuff here. So excited to dive into this, my friend. Let's kick things off. I mean, you mentioned something before as you were working with, talking about the clients you've worked with, where they seem to have, like you said, binary thinking. It's either it's this or that, right? There's right and wrong, black and white. And my experience working with folks is that, and myself as well, is the stories that I create in my mind, in essence, is a survival mechanism to help me better understand the world, right? To close the loop so I don't have these open what ifs happening in the world. And that's where my stories come, and they inform my beliefs about me and the external world and how I relate to all of that. So how can you explain, or what are the words to explain this kind of phenomenon of story, and how these stories color our view of the world?
Well, that question in itself is ironic because, as you just said, we use words and we try to put labels onto things to not only understand them, but contain them. It is absolutely a defense mechanism to try and control things by, at least, for me, for me, my control mechanism has always been knowing and understanding. So I want to know as much as possible. I click on the intellectual part of my brain to like learn as much as I can. And that way I feel like I have a grasp on it, like I'm in control of it. Whereas other people are more socially controlling, right? They might try to dominate social situations, but regardless, that's the expression of your beliefs and your stories in your mind, the way that you're showing up in the world. And so the way to the irony continues too, because words are actually so limited in their ability to fully describe anything.
They are completely limited as to explain very nuanced experiences, right?
Exactly. And oh my God, this is a philosophical rabbit hole that I love so much, but I'll make sure to bring it to a concise answer in a second for you. But it's the same. So if you try to describe to me what the color green is, it could be totally different to me, but we also don't have words to it. But like your experience could be totally different. So I'll never know what your experience of the color green is. Yeah. Right. In the exact same way that in social interactions, you're speaking words to me based on what you think those words are meaning. And then I could be interpreting those totally differently, even though we're speaking the same language. So words never, ever, ever actually get to the true description of what something is.
Right.
So to answer the question more focusedly, our stories, and the reason stories and metaphors are so powerful for us, whether we use it as an unhealthy defense mechanism or something that's actually healthy, that's like guiding our lives, is that they're illustrations. We're putting words to just concepts and images. And the problem or the trap is that a lot of people latch on to the words. For instance, like saying, I'm a XYZ, latch on to the job title instead of just the concept or the illustration of what they do for their work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the trap, but that's also why we create those stories and things. We want to have an illustration of who we are. We want to have an image in mind of why we're here. Like what's going on? What is this life all about?
Yeah. There's almost an existential pressure to get your shit together. To get my shit together, right? That's, I think, why we love these labels. So someone could say, I'm a doctor. Someone could say, I'm a gypsy. But that doctor in the same stroke could have the most minuscule self-belief and happiness and fulfillment in their life. And the gypsy could be living the dream in their reality, depending on the narrative that's running in their minds, the story they're telling themselves that either supports this reality or perhaps doesn't. Yeah. So it is so wild. I mean, we did an episode previously, Paul and Boyson and I, on how your story colors your world. And it kept coming up for that as like, yeah, we are holding the pen in this. I mean, our parents, our school, our faith can tell us that the sky is green and grass is blue. But we ourselves are the only ones that can either confirm or deny that for ourselves. That's the power of story.
And that's the only control we actually have. That whatever your faith is, there's the whole debate about free will, but the point is like you still have choice with what's being presented to you, whether it's the stories in your mind or how you want to go about your day. Yeah, that's the only control we have, that we actually can make choices.
I love this conversation because it brings me back to just holding space for the nuance in everyone, right? Because you and I could go to the same church, read the same scripture or prayer, and have completely different, get completely different things out of it. And this is also a great reminder for me to create deeper connection with others. I need to better understand, really, if we're both in the same situation, like, what is this meaning for me right now? and not assuming what it means for you in that moment. Because my story and your story could be totally different. I mean, I experienced this with my fiance. We're pregnant right now. So, being expectant parents, there are times where I can't think of a specific example where, she might feel something, right? Is it a flutter? Is it a kick? She might go, is something wrong? And I might go, oh, it kicked you. Like something happened. Like
it's alive.
It's alive, right? So it's so unique, right? So I think that's good to kind of set the scene for the beginning of this conversation, is that each of us have never walked in each other's shoes, and we could have identical circumstances with how we're raised, who raised us monetarily, right? Still doesn't change the fact that we're not statistics. We're all very different, especially in the stories that we tell ourselves. And so I want to ask, how does this relate to the most common question people have in their minds of like, what am I doing in my life? Or where am I going? Or what's my purpose in life? Is it even a valid question if these stories are at play telling you that the sky is green and grass is blue?
Nice. I'm going to work into that answer, because that's a great question. And firstly, I want to connect back to what you were just saying too, because relating now to this new question about like, what am I doing with my life? What's the point? Like, where am I going with this? Who am I? What space am I taking up? The thing about job titles that you brought up earlier, I never really knew this about myself consciously until I started my business. But I have never cared about job titles. It hasn't been conscious. It's just never been a thing. And so a thing for me. And so I have never, ever, ever felt that sort of like structure to my identity of like, oh, I'm a life coach, or, oh, I'm a whatever, I'm an accountant. I've never felt that. So I have felt the ambiguity of identity kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum that a lot of people who love job titles and want to latch onto it have, because for a lot of those people, the job title indicates what they're supposed to be doing with their lives. Yeah. And the second piece that's leading me into responding to your question too, that you just touched on, which is so profound for me, is when I was working in a psychiatric hospital, I was working with a patient who essentially on paper had the exact same life that I did. Same childhood, same number of people in the family, same sports they played growing up, same access to activities and sports and things. But at some point, this person made different choices and unfortunately went down the rabbit hole of drugs and alcohol, multiple rehabs, a lot of suicidality, and just over the course of many, many years. And she still had a good relationship with her family. And so she and I were sitting there, and I had that sort of existential moment of like, holy cow, this woman and I have had extraordinarily similar lives, but we're sitting on opposite sides of the therapeutic industry or the mental health world. And so just to prove your point of just the fact that like, we can be similar or look similar or talk similarly, but we all have our totally different experiences. And what I want to bring or pull out of that to answer your question is that people are afraid of accepting the fact that their journey in life is totally unique and that that's awesome, right? People are afraid of that sort of sense of being alone in their journey. And so it's very easy to kind of implode on ourselves or to trap ourselves in thinking, oh gosh, yeah, like nobody else is having this experience and that's not a good thing. So I'm just going to close in on myself because maybe I'm not successful enough. I'm not happy enough. I'm not, I don't have my shit together, as you said. And so that's kind of the top of the rabbit hole where these stories in our minds actually push us, because these stories are from other people and are conditioned from others, they push us to kind of implode instead of being open and seeing that, like, oh wow, our life journey is totally different. I can make different choices than Brandon makes. And see
Yes.
that as freedom, see that as like exhilaration. And Jim Carrey calls it, once you get past that point and you see that everything is just available to you, and you have total volition and independence, everything's just a play of form. You get to be playful with it, you get to be open to it, you get to be more relaxed with like the choices you make in your life.
I remember that's so interesting you bring that up, because I remember the experience when I had a gym back in Australia, and I went through a really challenging time financially, and then another time legally. And both times I didn't believe that anyone could understand or relate to what I was going through. Like, I was such a special boy in those moments that I wasn't allowing anyone to be able to help, because they would say, well, this could be blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you don't get it. You don't get it. Really, what I was saying to myself is, I don't get what's going on with this entanglement of story in my head, this catastrophizing that was occurring, that was just sending me deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. Because it's like, oh, no one can relate to what I'm experiencing. So that's like the dark side of that individualistic approach. Whereas I could both approach that differently. I could both go, yes, this is a unique situation, perhaps. However, there are so many people out there that have been through this and worse, that could shed some light or have some insights or be able to show me where the light is at the end of the tunnel to move through this. But in that moment, no, me, Brandon Clifton, I'm one of one. I'm one of one, and no one's ever been through this thing, meaning there is no solution outside of what I can do for it. So I need to figure it out myself. I'm going to go to my cave. I'm going to isolate. Goodbye. See you later. Try to help me. No, thanks.
Yeah.
Those stories were completely pulling the strings. So,
yeah.
This is because having been coached by you, having witnessed your coaching, having sent a lot of my friends and people close to me to you for coaching, they've all come back to me and shared with me something that I believe about your process, which is super important, is they didn't expect for you to kick things off with unlearning everything they'd learned up to that point. They were thinking that you were going to be like, tell me your goals, man. Like, tell me your goals, and we're gonna help you build out your week, and we're gonna start off with a cold plunge, and we're gonna make sure you fast for blah blah blah. No, no. So give us an insight into working with you and what the kind of beginning of the process is for how you help people get on top of these stories and help them identify what's actually true for them.
Sure, thank you. Well, firstly, to what you were just saying before. What I've learned in Catholicism is the actual greatest sin that you could ever commit is thinking that you cannot be helped or saved. Because it like just takes away, all divine power. And so if you're saying like, nope, nobody can help me, I'm done, I'm a lost cause, that's actually the most like ultimate sin you can commit, because you're settling into those stories. You're accepting them so hard that
it's like abdication of any power to change it.
Exactly. You're just stepping yourself into the cage, locking the door. You're throwing away the key.
Right.
Like everyone else is watching like, hey, we can help. What are you doing? But you're chucking the key away.
Yeah. Don't cry for me. I'm already dead. Barney Stinson, Simpsons reference.
There you go. But yeah, so when, that's a very, very easy segue, because like I said, all of my work has been in quote unquote crisis. So the clients that I coach now are more so in the existential crisis, which means that they have gotten to the point where the stories in their minds have been running the show for so long that they feel the physical manifestation of being trapped in a cage. They feel the pain of the tension. They feel the dread getting up in the morning. They feel the misalignment in a relationship. They just feel like something's off. They feel lost. They feel trapped. That leads to overwhelm and burnout. But they just know, they're like, it's this confusing question of, wait, I'm still getting up in the morning. I'm still going to work. I'm still in this relationship. Like, why am I so unhappy? So they're functioning on paper, they're like going about their day. So it's a lot of secret suffering that a lot of people feel alone in and don't know how to deal with. So they come to me when those stories are most rampant. And as you said, a lot of life coaches and therapists think in a very linear kind of way. Especially coaches will think in a very linear kind of way where the past doesn't matter. Let's take you right now and start planning how to adjust the lifestyle. And then if you set the right goals and do an ice bath every morning or whatever it might be, this will all just kind of chip away and you'll reorient, you'll rewrite the script and go. Now, there are certain cases where that does work. However, in the work that I do, these people are coming to me at a crisis moment where they've suddenly realized I am either going to burn out or I need to get help. So the stories are so intense that there has to be unlearning. We have to decondition so much first before we can talk about anything else, anything about fulfillment in their career, anything about purpose of their lives, what career changes to even make. I have a lot of people who come to me kind of treating me like a career coach, but they don't know that there's about 6 weeks of very intensive therapeutic deconditioning that has to happen first. And so in general, it's the irony of that Anthony DeMello talks about. He's a Jesuit priest and a psychotherapist from India. And he talks about the irony of learning how to become enlightened requires unlearning. Because all we've done is spent our lives being taught things and learning things. And now when we get to a point where we want to change those things that we've learned, we need to unlearn a ton to free up the space to learn the things that we actually want to know and make real in our lives.
Right. It's an analogy that you and I used to toss around a lot, is like, it's all good wanting to climb the mountain, but if you're dragging so much baggage with you, the pack is so heavy.
Yeah.
So heavy because you're trying to drag all these stories that have made up, right? That have made up who you are to this point. And in the Mankind Project and various men's work, they get quite Jungian and they go, well, this shadow, let's just say, this part of you that is hidden somewhere, this story that has informed your beliefs about the world, it has served a purpose, but it no longer is serving that purpose. So, I mean, we trace this back
absolutely
in our interview with Dr. David Gruder, where we introduced a shadow. We talk about how shadow stories really are survival mechanisms that we pick up at a very, very, very young age. And they almost become like the modus operandi of how we see the world. I mean, from such a young age, it's like, yep, this is the lens in which I'm going to look at the world till I'm 80 or further. And so if we're trying to climb these peaks and achieve these amazing things like we want to, or the world tells us we have to, no wonder it's so tough when we're dragging just this, like, may as well be pulling a sled up the mountain full of all this old narrative that is so outdated.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the heavy backpack and the baggage that we carry, because speaking of trying to figure out what's real or what's not, something that I just put on my own podcast that is from a client conversation recently is that, like, a lot of people will change jobs or get out of relationships because they think that something about the job or the relationship is unfulfilling or unsatisfying. But really, that's work that they're not doing themselves. Yep. They're looking beyond themselves. They're leapfrogging themselves into what's on the outside world.
They start living below the line. They start blaming. They make excuses, and then they live in denial. Of what's actually happening.
Exactly. And this client came to me asking about career change kind of things, when in reality, she was just burnt out.
Yeah.
She was just overwhelmed and not addressing the stress that needs to be addressed, and the stories too. So it's truly that question of like, okay, but what's real?
Without breaking confidentiality, and maybe the easiest way to do this is for you to share your experience of that. But
of course,
like, what are some client examples, or what's an example of yours of a story that was so set in stone so black and white that turned out just to be straight BS?
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable telling the most dramatic one of my life.
Sure.
And this actually was the impetus for why I'm able to even do this work. And why I did the work myself first, which would then quote unquote qualify me to do this work for others. Up until a point in college, I was very much the kind of like caretaker personality, where like, you know, my deepest limiting beliefs is that I don't matter. Like I don't have a voice, so I don't matter. That's like my lifelong limiting belief. That has affected my self-esteem and self-worth, and that's what I've been working on for, you know, decades now.
Right,
now that I'm aware of it.
That's a shadow.
Yeah, that's the shadow. Absolutely. And so how that would play out in relationships is that I would get validation or feel like I had value by taking care of the other person. And then there was a point in college where, without as many details, just out of respect for the other person, and this was my responsibility because you know, I'm the one that made these decisions, but I remained in a relationship too long because I was serving that need of taking care of that person. They were going through a lot, absolutely, but it was too long, and it was very much at the expense of both my physical and mental health. And there was a period of chronic stress and anxiety from it that I was putting myself through. Very little sleep, like very just poor energy all around, everything that is, you know, comorbid with emotional issues. And then as soon as I was out of that relationship, the anxiety and the stress plummeted into depression, which, let's nerd out for a second. The depression is just the recovery mechanism for that. Like it's a proportional recovery mechanism of that extremely elevated chronic level of stress and anxiety I was feeling. So I went through the elevated stage, like the, you know, the toxic hyperactivity of my nervous system, and then the total opposite in order to recover. So that was the game-changing moment where I was just like, I plummeted into the depression. And luckily I never was suicidal. I understood why I was depressed. I was very aware of like, oh, this is how it happened.
Textbook, here we are.
Yeah, it literally was. And I actually turned it into an extracurricular research project. I interviewed a ton of professors at my school to be like, what just happened to me? Like, can you like so it was the, you know, the chronic stress happened in 1 year, then the depression was during the summer, and then into the following fall. And that fall was when I felt like I finally had like footing under me that I could learn what was going on. And that's when I really deep dove into what the stories were, what the beliefs were, and recognizing that I was playing that role that wasn't serving me. I was looking for value and worth in a place that was never going to be sustainable. And it's not healthy for the other person.
You were just emptying your cup into that other person. And we see this a lot in codependent relationships. You have the hero, and then you have the one that likes being saved. Right?
Bingo.
The hero has to save the day, not realizing that it's at an expense. And the victim likes to be saved, not realizing that it's at an expense. And that's where like the cyclical codependency kicks in. And so from that moment, you were able to identify, oh, wow, like there is these sets of beliefs and stories I've been telling myself that allowed this relationship to get to where it was. So many in those moments, perhaps there's feelings of shame, fear, anger. Like, what were the feelings for you? And then I have a question behind that.
Sure. Honestly, in the beginning, there weren't a lot of feelings because I had been feeling so much that in the depression, I was numb, but in a nice way. I was numb, like in a relieving way of like
a morphine way.
This was, I should say that this was the great humbling of my life, because playing that role with those stories built up my ego in a big way. And so what was beautiful about this was that this just absolutely destroyed my ego. So I felt new. I felt like a little child. I felt naked. I felt very vulnerable. And it was in the middle of college, which is a very, very developmental time for a lot of people. So I felt a lot of things and nothing at the same time, if that makes sense. I was just kind of, I was witnessing the swirl of emotions as I could then start to finally recover from what I had just put myself through.
It's what you're explaining, I relate to in a breakup I had where a mentor of mine said, "Oh, you've just experienced a soul wound."
Yeah.
It was cut so deep, straight to the mass, right? Straight to where I was holding it in my body. And that space now could be occupied by something different, which is that duality of like, that really hurt, but also, oh, heck yeah, here we go. Like I have an opportunity here to replace this old story with a new one. So the old story being that you don't have a voice, the new story being,
oh, that I do have a voice.
Really?
Nice tee up there.
Oh, really? Oh,
Really?
shocker.
Oh.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? Now, this one takes some courage, and you have it. Come check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks, with new sessions starting every month where you can join other men on the path. You can find out more about the Men's Work course in the show notes.
In your experience, you learned that before you could do any accumulative work, there had to be an unlearning experience. There had to be, I mean, I'm going to paraphrase the snot out of this one, but Bruce Lee said it's not the daily addition, but the daily like subtraction where we can find mastery. It's not the adding of all these different things. It's actually the removal of all these things and focusing on really like what's at the core. You know, he goes, I'm not afraid of the guy who knows 10,000 kicks and has done them all once. I'm afraid of the guy who's done one kick 10,000 times.
For sure.
So getting rid of the distractions, all the other stuff, all the stories, mom wants me to be this, dad wants me to be that, school tells me I have to do this, get rid of all that and get to us at our core. What do I find fulfilling? What is true for me?
Absolutely.
This is the work, man. Like this is the work. I mean, if those of you listening, I mean, I know we've surveyed you that those of you listening, we have many of you in the Mankind Project, not sitting in groups. And all of this always comes back to the work in some form or fashion going, I need to get clear on what has been driving the bus up into this point before I can ever really in a clean and clear way go for my goals. Go for the big, hairy, audacious things that are like, I know are in my capacity and my ability, but we got to cut these balls and chains, thank them, but let them go. So
absolutely.
It can only get worse before it gets better because we have to go through.
Yeah. And that's precisely what people need to know. And that's precisely what keeps people from doing this work, that it does get super messy and extremely hard and painful first in the process. This is the hero's journey part. Like this is you reject the calling because it's a lot of work, right? And it's very uncomfortable. And, as I was mentioning before, the reason I now serve people who are getting to what I call the crisis threshold, where it's either they're going to burn out and crash or they can get help.
It's a tipping point.
Yeah. When they get to that tipping point is because I burnt out and crashed. Because I didn't know what was going on. And so I needed to burn out and crash in order to just wipe the ego away, unlearn everything, so that I always use the metaphor because I played with Legos growing up, that I had just blown apart this Lego castle. And then now I was sitting there in college, like journaling. I journaled every single day. I was journaling just crazily, just because everything that I was journaling was just the next Lego piece. I was learning who I was for the first time and just building up a new castle. And It's incredibly painful, but that, like you just said a minute ago, like you have to do that, the unlearning. It literally is like pulling off a band-aid. You have to unlearn all the stuff. You have to remove what's been covering the truth for your entire life before you can have that space to fill it with something better, healthier, happier, more successful, more fulfilling.
Yeah, I love that you use the hero's journey to kind of frame that, because that is right. We get to the threshold. It's Frodo and Sam getting to the edge of the Shire, and Sam going, if I take one more step, this will be the furthest I've ever been away from home. And it's like, yes, this is the edge of the comfort zone. By going down deep into the cave, by doing this unlearning, it will be the furthest you've been from home. From the safety of your mind and what you've been told to be true by whichever influences or environments you were raised in. And so that's the beauty of having someone like you, Taylor, and why I'm such a huge advocate for therapy, for coaching, because you have been through that experience. You've touched the stove, you've been into the cave, you've experienced bring it back to the hero's journey, the death and the inevitable rebirth that comes after that you can facilitate that journey. And this is just one of those reminders to all of you listening out there. If you're like me and often want to take your problems into your cave and try and fix them yourself, how's that working for you? How's that working for you? You see, that's the story that many of us men have been taught in life, is that men have their shit together. They don't ask for help. You're in the problem, you solve the problem. No, exactly. That's not how we're biologically made. It isn't. That the script is so broken, where we need coaching, we need guidance, we need friends that we can connect with that have been through similar stuff. It doesn't have to be the exact same journey, but that shared awareness of, man, you've been through the pits. You have some insights I don't have right now, because I feel like I'm just at the beginning of the pit and that diving in. So I think by now, Taylor, we've elucidated enough that yes, you have to go down before you can come up. Yeah. It's not backwards like people think. People think I have to go backwards to go forward, and that's not true. Yeah. It's not true. It's still forward. It's just down. It's deep.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. You're still moving forward. It's the classic metaphor of like, you're still moving forward, but you have to climb down a mountain into the valley, then up another mountain. And you're still moving forward though. Your body is always pointing forward. Yeah. There's no way you can go back.
Beautiful. And so you have this beginning stage of like unlearning what has been learned. Then the next stage, which is kind of like in the journey, you're in the process, is I've gone down, I've identified these stories that aren't serving me, and I have to replace them.
Yeah.
So what's the process to replacing these beliefs or these stories, these narratives that have really determined and steered our lives up to this point?
Yeah, that second phase, as you mentioned before, is totally the phase where now that space has been cleared up, now that Band-Aid has been pulled off, now we have space to actually write. It's like we've erased all the stories that you've written in pencil on a piece of paper that you've been carrying your whole life. And now you have a blank page. And that's incredibly disorienting for a lot of people. Like I said before, like that kind of freedom and volition that they haven't been used to for years, if not decades, is terrifying for people. And so it's absolutely a mental, emotional, and behavioral process of rewriting those scripts now. Because basically the point is like, all right, you now have the choice. What do you want the record player to play? And so the process I go through is, certain things that I've developed over the years from different therapies, but also certain things that Tony Robbins does in all of his interventions too, which is just going through this systematic process of talking through like, okay, let's think about the old. It's like what you do when you're weighing options. It's like, get a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. Yeah. On the one side, write down, okay, now that we know the belief, because we just spent a few sessions talking about it, write down the old belief. what emotion did that create, or emotions? Where in your body was that? How did it actually manifest? And then what was the result? And the result would be, it would ruin this relationship, or I wouldn't advocate for my needs, or whatever it might be. And then, at least the way that I do it, is I'll start at the bottom of that list to start the next list, which is like, okay, cool. What's the behavior now that we want? What's the outcome? What do you want? How do you want to show up? And they might say, okay, well, I do want to advocate for my needs, or I want to feel calmer. I want to feel more present. I want to listen more. I want to enjoy my work more. I want whatever it might be. And then we go upstream from there, which is, okay, if you were feeling that relaxed in your relationship, how would that feel in your body? Where would that be? And then go up to the emotion of like, okay, cool. Like put some words to the emotion around that. And then the last step of that is like, cool, what thoughts would you be having? How would you feel about yourselves? What are the beliefs that would be, what's the self-talk if you were in that new place of new behavior, new emotions, new energy, new sensations? And so I never write it for them. They get to kind of write it in an emotional way themselves. We write the script. And so now they have that script that they can keep coming back to. It's not just the script, though. It's a physical experience too.
Right. It's got to get tangible. It's got to be practical.
Correct.
and pragmatic. Because that's one thing I always say to my guests when they come on. I'm like, yeah, you've got this great story, or you've got this great philosophy or framework, but you best give my listeners something they can actually put into play and have action with, which is what you're doing with your coaching. Is you're not reading a piece of philosophy and letting them ruminate and sit on that for do what you will. It's like, hey, what do you believe is the next step? Not the mountain, but the next step right now into confirming this new belief. Because it's all easy. It's all well and good to be like, I, Brandon Clift, am an NBA superstar. But if I don't get out and dribble, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. I have to reaffirm those beliefs through putting it into action. And I'm not talking about hustle, and I'm not talking about grind. It's just, if the belief is, well, let me ask you, when the story became, I, Taylor Wilkins, had to have a voice, how did you put that into practice? How did you reaffirm that new belief system?
Yeah. So, firstly, that script took a long time because I had not been familiar with Tony Robbins in college or learned these interventions. But like I said, it went in the order that I just described, where after my experience, I was so destroyed and leveled out and humbled and born anew that I had just come from 8 or 10 months of chronic stress, the pain of being in a constant fight or flight stress response state. And I felt the pain that had caused in my body, the actual effect of the cortisol had. And so I wanted the opposite of that. I wanted to be calm. I didn't want stress. I wanted to relax. I want to chill out for a bit. Yeah. After all that, neurological excitation, I was like, let's just chill now. Yeah. And so that's the behavior I want. I want it to be a lot calmer and thoughtful about my engagement in things instead of automatically defaulting to others' needs.
Right.
And so that was the behavior. I then identified the feelings that I wanted, the physical sensations of just being calmer, kind of more level, more harmonious, I should say, and not going for any kind of extremes of like happiness or, trying to prevent total sadness, but just letting the kind of the flows happen.
That's what you're describing to me is the difference between those that get the aha and realize that, step by step, I need to integrate this into my life, or those that get the aha and go, I'm leaving my wife, I'm ditching the kids, I'm buying the Harley, I'm riding cross country, I'm joining the commune, see you later, right? It's like, no, like you wanted the bridge to be solid towards this new reality of you. So it's like brick by brick. First finding the calm, then little experiences that reaffirm that you have a voice. Correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
I just have to point out, like, the most critical thing about any of this work that we're talking about is that I found value in the self-awareness that I was gaining. I wasn't doing, like, there was nothing with the external world that I was doing, and I was finding value.
That's
Right?
yeah, that's what you and I were talking about like way ago, about like get a PhD in yourself.
Exactly.
Because there is endless amounts of entertainment that comes with, oh wow, that was an unfortunate interaction with that person. That's kind of a regrettable incident. How did that happen? Oh no way, I learned that from dad. Oh no way. It's interesting. It is really cool to see where those things were picked up, and to gain that awareness of, oh, that's why I do that. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I get to prevent all these common inconvenient things that happen in my life. I get to do better to prevent those going forward. That's really, really neat. And so this is, again, back to the reminder of the person feels like they're standing on the precipice of the hero's journey, like right at the beginning. They don't know whether to jump in, dive in, stick a toe in. It is more rewarding than you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And it's going to feel like shit at so many times. There will be so many moments where it's like, oh God, quit twisting the knife in my gut. I mean, like, I'm projecting that experience. I can only speak from mine, but what I've witnessed is, yeah, there may be moments that you're like, no, peace, I'm out.
Yeah.
But when you have a coach like Taylor to be able to go, I'm not going to let you run away. I'm not going to let you run away from this. I see you and I get it. I get why you want to run, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to take another step forward.
Yep. And before you continue, I'm going to add to that too, in that it does feel like there's like a knife in you, but the knife stays there while you continue to do things that are enjoyable. So like, the reason I say that and point that out is because 99% of my clients all get to this point you just described, and it's extremely confusing for them because they're going through a very, very challenging experience, but they're getting so much reward and fulfillment and exhilaration and relief from it. And that's what's mind-blowing to people, of just like, wait a minute, there's like intentional suffering that I can be doing that's actually super rewarding. It's like, how can I have pleasure and pain at the same time? It's the classic contradiction, right?
Yeah.
And so 99% of my clients are always like, this is weird. Something's wrong, because it
hurts, but I'm addicted. Yeah.
Exactly. But it hurts so good. That's like the classic thing.
It hurts so good.
And it's such a confusing paradox to have occur at the same time, where like you're going through something so painful, but you don't want it any other way.
Yeah.
And that's that enjoyment we need to get people to.
Of course you live in Manhattan. The
sirens, you hear the sirens,
and the honking.
That the ambulance that's stuck in traffic is just trying to emphasize my point, Brandon.
Yeah. Well, and I think a great example, I mean, I didn't know you when you were in college going through that experience of first acknowledging that your voice is valuable, but there have been interactions in our friendship where you have identified how my oftentimes ability to express my voice was impeding us able to have like an equitable conversation. Or things we were working on, things we were doing, just hanging out. It's like I would take the lead and just control the situation, and you would have this ability to, with like surgical precision, stop me, get my awareness, identify how you didn't appreciate, or you just acknowledge the way I was turning up. And it allowed me, rather than my amygdala to go into fight, flight, freeze, it allowed me to go, wow, he said that really eloquently. That might be a blind spot. Hey man, thank you. Right? Where previously, when, part of my shadow has been F you, right? It's been, no, don't try and get one up on me. I'll, you want to go 3 decibels, I'll go 4. So because of my work journey, I've been in those moments able to go, wow, thank you. Like, thank you for that. And that was you using your voice, advocating for yourself. And I think that's why you and I have been able to develop such a strong friendship, is because we know we can go there together. And I know that when you speak up to me, that's a challenge, right? That's something that's come from a ton of work, and there still may be some shadow going on there.
Always is.
It's always there, right? So that's the beauty of this awareness and this work, to be able to stop in the moment and go, how's that true? Wow, where does that turn up elsewhere? What do you know? In this season of life, these past couple of months, that's been happening a lot. What's going on? There's some work there. How cool.
And then you continue, then you turn back around and tell me about that thought process.
Bingo.
Yeah,
that time
we want to share it together.
Yeah. The other day when you didn't call me out, but you called me into this awareness piece. Well, I actually went and sat with my coach and found this out. Thank you. You just pulled the thread that allowed me to completely get a full awareness of what's going on in this place.
Yeah, but what you're not sharing is that you asked me to. You invited it too.
So because it turning up,
you didn't
that
know
way,
what I was gonna.
Me turning up that way really was like this deep unconscious, probably cry for help to do that work. Yeah. Anyhow.
The point I want to drill about this is that you and I are such good friends, even though we're totally different people, totally different personalities, a lot of different interests, that we care about the exploration that you were just talking about. I know that if I call you out, or how you worded it, call you into a new awareness, that you actually want to hear that. Just like me, I want to be called out because it means that I can explore something new about myself and learn something.
Yeah.
And that's what I just try to keep preaching from the rooftops, just that if you can get to a point where you enjoy the process of self-discovery, however big or however small, and you're excited to learn, like if I'm excited to be like, oh shoot, Brandon just pointed something out in me, or brought something up for me to at least just think about, even if he's wrong. Or like, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong, but it's like, at least it's something for me to think about, and I'm excited to think about it and talk about it with him. That's the gold. You have just the desire to do that exploration.
I have an anecdote. I was at a networking thing. It was an event in Anaheim. Anytime you go to Anaheim, California, you're going to be in some Marriott Forum bloody room full of people in suits and padded shoulders, and a lot of masks, I would judge, and I myself have those masks. And I don't know, there was something about this time in life and this event where I just felt like, man, I've got this, I'm good. And I tell you, out of those 2,000 people, I'm pretty sure I remembered the names of 600. Like, I just felt totally on. And there was this woman who happened to be in some of the circles that I got really close with. And I didn't quite feel like I could, basically, I felt like she was looking at me and just being like, who the F are you, dude? Like, yeah, I've been around here longer than you. Like, you clearly love yourself. Anywho, later that night at the bar, all of us are hanging out, and she comes over a little tipsy and just goes, "You're so full of yourself, aren't you?" And she goes, and she's like, "You controlled every comment, blah, blah, blah." Like, and that there was this part of me that instantly went to, oh God, that's my greatest fear. Someone calling me out for being like, my whole life I was told to be small. Don't be big, don't be bold, don't be beautiful. And now I've been doing all this work and being big, bold, beautiful. And then there's like the shadow, the doubt. But it was so cool that because I've done so much work around that, sitting in circle, I've had people in circle call me out for that. This isn't you, Brandon, it's a mask. But I've also had those same people in circle share with me that I am being big, bold, and beautiful, but it's not the show, it's the glow. Right? I wasn't showing off a thing. I was just glowing. And I, to this day, believe I was glowing. I didn't feel any insecurity. I didn't feel like it was coming from a bad place. But it was so cool in that moment to hear her say that and go, wow, thank you. And that completely caught her off guard because I think she was ready for a fight or something. I don't know. But it was like, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. And that gives me a chance to look at it because that may be a blind spot of mine. I want you to know that I'll determine what that work is, right? But thanks. And it was so amazing to watch her demeanor change and to be like, oh, whoa, I wasn't expecting that reaction. I couldn't have had that reaction if it wasn't for the work. And I in that moment could have said, tell me something I don't know. Duh. But that wasn't the truth anymore. The truth was, no, I felt in a really good place. I felt like I was really connecting with people. I can't control everyone's reaction, but I'd done some work around this. Not to say I'm ever done with that work, but that's for me just something that came alive in me to share, to go, yeah, this stuff is priceless. Absolutely priceless. Doing the work. And I say this all the time in the show, just do the work. And I know it's scary. I know it's gross. I know it's messy. I know it's mucky and it's not linear.
And it's called work.
But it's called work. Exactly. But it is the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. I would not be engaged and about to have a baby with the woman of my dreams if I hadn't done this work. Taylor, when you met me in 2019, that Brandon would not be in this relationship, plain and simple. Plain and simple. It's because of the work. So we've unlearned. We've identified stories that no longer serve. We've rewritten the stories.
Hold on. I'm not letting you off the hook that easy on that conversation.
Expose me on my own damn show. Don't do it. Fine.
I know what you're doing.
Get this over
with. No. This is no calling out of you. I love that. And again, it just proves the point. Like, it's about the openness. You need to be open to this work because you only have that response to that woman, not only because you've done the work, but the first step is being open to the work.
Yeah.
You have to be available to do it and humble enough to recognize that there's work to do. Right. And if I can share really quickly an anecdote of my own that you just totally triggered in me. I think it's really helpful to clarify to your listeners also that even if we change the script, a lot of my coaching programs are only 3 months long. So it's just a deep dive intensive, like 3 months, and you get everything we've talked about, including what I know you were segueing into, but then of course the work continues. And so for going back to my personal experience, I was finding value. I hadn't rewritten the script yet. I was just finding value and worth in my new self-discovery and exploration. I hadn't rewritten the belief yet about whether I have a voice. I didn't actually realize for years after that experience that it was that I felt like I didn't have a voice, right? I didn't actually put those words to it for a long time. So it's really important for your listeners to know that rewriting the script and what I know we'll talk about next, which is about figuring out the purpose and the meaning and the future purpose of your life, that is an ongoing process as well. Even if I help you define the words, it's the accountability of actually actualizing it that takes time. And so the quick anecdote that I will hit too is I had done, I do this self-exploration work on myself daily, all day long, just like you do, right? And we love it. So I've been doing it for years, and I went to this event that's very similar to the MKP New Warrior Training weekend, but it was in a corporate setting. So it was like corporate mindfulness arm of this corporate company in Boston. It was a 2-day intensive thing in their office. And they had this activity at the end of the first day that I can't spoil because then it will ruin the effect of the activity and ruin their program. But it was an activity, it was a game between two teams, and there are lots of rules around it or whatnot. But regardless of the outcome of the game and the points and who wins or loses or whatever, it is a game designed to show you a lot about yourself, about your personality. Now, before I tell you what I learned from that game, at lunch that day, this woman comes up to me out of nowhere at lunch, and she looks at me and she goes, I feel like you really just need to scream. I feel like you just need to let it out, man. And I was really taken aback And she's not wrong. I do hold I held myself back actually a lot back then, especially in group settings. I was always the observer. I would calculate whether I really needed to speak or share or whatever.
True introvert.
True introvert. And I'm very much changed in that regard. I'm much more talkative in groups now, but she could tell that I was like holding something back. And what I didn't realize was that I was holding back a voice that I didn't think I had. But she called it out so bluntly. I was just like, you're not wrong, but I just don't know how to scream.
Yeah.
Right. And the game that afternoon made me realize even more so that I didn't have a voice because I didn't speak up at certain times. And so that night when I was driving home in Boston rush hour traffic, it all started flooding to me of just like, oh my gosh, I don't have a voice. That's the belief. I don't think I matter because I don't have a voice. And it just like, pew, 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 like everything just started like falling in. And the next day, the whole day was just each of us going one at a time, explaining what we learned from the game. And everybody else would talk through these certain things. The group might have follow-up questions, or there was time allotted for follow-up questions to try to like help you dig even deeper. So a lot of people were doing that. I kind of went like halfway through and I got up there and I just let it rip. I was like, that game pissed me off so much. Like I went home, so, like everybody else had been feeling so relieved and happy and just like, oh, feels so peaceful. I was like, I was pissed. And explained how like I sat through that whole game, not speaking up for myself. And I realized that because I don't feel like I have a voice and I just let it rip. I explained all of the new awareness I've come to. And I like just ranted fluidly like that for 10 minutes straight.
Wow.
And no one had a follow-up question. Everybody was just like, okay. And I was like, all right. And I just went and sat down. That was one of those turning points because that was the moment I realized my basement belief was that I felt like I didn't matter. And that it was based on the fact that I felt like I didn't have a voice. So it took years of doing the work of the unlearning before I even was able to change the script, you see? That's why it's phase 1 and phase 2. Yeah. But I just distinctly remember that that experience like yours.
Well, and I think I love that story. That's a new one for me. I haven't heard that one. And I think something important to illuminate is that those years of that story, it didn't mean that all over those years that you were listening to the Smiths and wearing only black and, just hating life. Like the work does not mean that you don't have fun and take trips and create great connections and relationships with people while you're in the unlearning phase. It just means that you're creating greater capacity for more fulfillment, deeper relationships, more enjoyment. Doesn't mean that, oh, I'm doing the work, my life's going to suck and my wife's going to hate me and my kids are going to avoid me for the 6 weeks I'm working with Taylor and diving deep into unlearning. No, it's just a process. It's just a messy process. It's part of life. All your other functions will continue.
Exactly. Right? And as I've said a couple of times in this, and what I try to tell people all the time is that this process, even though it feels like you're going inward, and you are obviously, but like what it truly does is it expands you. It expands reality. It opens you up and expands the space that you can inhabit in the world. And so that's not limiting.
No.
That's actually creating more space for you to grow into. This is no longer a cage. It's just an open field.
Yeah.
So that's why you can find so much more enjoyment and fit in those things still while you continue to expand. You're not confining yourself.
Yeah. Beautifully said, mate. Beautifully said. So we move into the fun stage, right? The fun phase of defining life purpose and meaning. See, if at the beginning of a coaching relationship, someone was to say, well, what do you want in life? What's your purpose in life? If this previous work hadn't been done, you're kind of setting sail with a captain that doesn't know where the boat's going, a crew that has no idea what they're supposed to be doing. The hull has holes in it.
I was just
Yeah. So the ship is
Yeah.
not seaworthy in the first place, and you're not going to get far. That's why I found myself so many times as not just a non-starter, but if I did start, I'd just crash and burn and fail. People knew, there was a stage in my life in my early 20s where people knew me as the guy with all the great ideas and plans, and then they'd check in a month later and be like, how's that going? And I'd be like, ooh, that was like 5 plans ago.
Yeah,
that was like 5 new $1 billion ideas ago. So it was, yes, it was either a non-starter or I just would start and fail because all the things I hadn't got my captain clear on where we're going or the crew clear on the actions going forward. So knowing that we've got a short period of time, I think we've done the meat and potatoes of this process. Give us an insight into, the fun we get to have now in redefining life's purpose and meaning.
Yeah. I mean, you hit another perfect nail about the fact that a lot of times people want to jump into the purpose first because it's the fun part. But there's so much painful unlearning that has to happen first that people, no matter what, if I told you your life purpose or I helped you figure it out and you're so excited and you're stoked, you're still carrying that backpack you brought up before. So it does flip the script on a lot of coaches where I save the future planning until the very end of the process. And it's the most fun. And it's when you feel the most expanded, when you're feeling the most fulfilled already. It's when we've already redefined your value and your worth as a human being in the universe. And now you get to do something with it. Now you get to play with it. And so it's different for everybody. But the thing that I want to really drill in about life purpose is that people still trap themselves thinking that it needs to be something that's pretty surface level. For instance, like what I mean is, someone, for instance, if you're working with someone in the financial world, some people might say that their purpose in life is to, be a financial advisor or a stock trader or something.
Sure.
But a lot of people will say that next level down and think that that's deep enough, which is my purpose is to make people money. It's like, no, because that's still conditional. Yeah. That still requires you to be in the financial world to do that.
Right. Be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. So it's like, what if you're a millionaire when you're 32?
Yeah. And then what?
And then what? Right. Yeah. Right. So it's very conditional and very externally focused.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's too shallow, to be honest. It's not deep enough.
Yeah.
And so my philosophy of life purpose that I teach, and this is based a lot on Viktor Frankl's work, is that no matter what you do, like if you're able to define your true purpose deeply enough, it doesn't matter how many careers you have.
Yeah. The what and the how doesn't matter. Yeah.
Exactly. Because the purpose is what you are going to be actualizing in your life, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you're dating, no matter what your work is, no matter where you're living, no matter how many times you change all 3 of those things.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And so, for instance, a classic example is a woman in a corporation who was like high up in the corporation. She thought her purpose in life was more related to her writing. She was a really great writer. She impacted a ton of people with her writing and her newsletters and all this. But if she changed careers or lost her ability to write, does that mean that she loses her purpose? So then we drilled it down even further. And her purpose in life was not only an element of inspiration for people, but her purpose in life was much more tied to her ability to independently take initiative to explore the world.
Yeah.
And that's where she got just so much like fulfillment out of it. Just happened to be expressed in writing, and then she was very successful in business. But if her purpose is independent problem solving and exploring the world, you could have any career. You could change your career however many times you want, but if that's the North Star, you'll always be happy.
Yes. There are 3 people I attribute this podcast too. Like that if they didn't turn up in my life, this podcast wouldn't happen. Number one, Ashanti Branch, we've had on the show, taking off the masks. This show previously was Masks Off Monday, which Taylor, you were a part of quite frequently. Boyson Hodgson, who co-hosted this show and, one of the guys that kind of green-lit this project, and you, Taylor. And I don't know if I've ever shared that with you, because this is really the first time it's come clear. And I can see in your face right now, you're like, huh?
What?
When you took me through the process and, you coached me through a challenging experience, helped me get to the why. You helped me identify that, I don't know if I call it purpose, but something that's very important to me that aligns with my purpose is being able to express myself. And this is an extension of that.
Mm-hmm.
This show is an extension of that. And open mic nights are an extension of that. Having friends over, playing board games, whatever, it's a chance to express myself. The work, and so how that relates is to the labels. I was a coach for many years. I was a branding and marketing specialist and all that stuff. I do this podcast. I am the enrollment coordinator for the Mankind Project USA. I'm starting a contract with our local university here, teaching leadership and emotional intelligence, helping a buddy with a leadership company and leadership summit that he's pulling out. There's no label really in any of that other than, hi, I'm Brandon. Mm-hmm. But the purpose, right, with a kid on the way and my ever evolving relationship with Christine, the what and the how has just figured itself out. Mm-hmm. All these gigs came effortlessly because I just turn up every day going, where's an opportunity to express? Mm-hmm. Where is a role that I can contribute and help and use my voice for good? It's not, I need one job, one career that has all of that and has a title that reflects my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
And part of my purpose aligns with my desire to be a work from home dad. And all of these jobs support that. Mm-hmm. What do you know? Like this is a really cool, like, live aha for me to think that work. And I remember I was sitting on my couch in Salt Lake when we were on the phone and you were taking me through this process, through the journaling process. And it came to that. How freaking cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dude, I'm geeking out right now.
I'm jamming with you. I love it.
This is dope.
This is it. And if you don't mind me jam with you, like the craziest things, my entire career has been in mental health, and I can change it anytime. I've done all sorts of random other jobs, but I know my purpose in life is to bring peace and inspire peace. And what that looks like is contentment or just relief or whatever it might be. And so I do that through my coaching. But I've never thought of my purpose as I need to be a therapist. I need to do it in like therapy kinds of ways. Since I know that my purpose is peace, I can do that in a billion ways.
Yeah.
And I do that in my relationship. And I'm like eternally gratified that I live out my purpose in my relationship with Sarah. That's why it's part of why it's so fulfilling and that we are so connected. But in my career, I could leave the mental health field and pursue a totally different interest, but it would still bring people peace because I know that's that actual mission. Which is why it's fine to give people permission that your interests can change. You don't need to work in one job forever.
And this is the beauty of this, because when someone asks you not what you do, but why do you do it, there's the answer.
There it is.
That's a big question too. Mm-hmm. Generally it's surface level in most small talk. What do you do? But when I always love to ask why. And if someone was to say, why do you do the podcast? I get to go, man, I get a chance to express my thoughts and my feelings as I figure out this whole manhood and masculinity thing. Mm-hmm. And I have amazing, incredible listeners that are wherever they are on their journey that get to figure this stuff too. How freaking cool. And so when I wake up in the day and I go, oh God, I got to edit 3 episodes today. I go, wait a second. What do I get to do when I edit? record the intro and outro. Expression. Sweet.
Yeah.
Energy just doubled all of a sudden. Right. So yeah, man. This stuff, although at times can seemingly seem like rudimentary to this whole men's work or personal work process, there's a reason why it always comes back to this: the unlearning, the rewriting, and then setting sail from there.
It's all about simplification too. Yeah. Everybody, like to your point, it's rudimentary, it's fundamental, it's basic. And it needs to be basic because we spend our lives getting overwhelmed and overblowing stories that aren't true, stories that aren't ours, I should say. And so that's why people are so shocked, like you just jammed on. Like, that's why you're so shocked when it's, oh, this is all it's just about expression. That's one word, Brandon. That's your purpose in life, is one word. It's mine too. My peace. It's one word.
Yeah.
It's it's so simple. Like it's so overly simplified, and people don't know that that it can be that simple, and that's the answer.
Yeah. That's why that's why when you ask them, write down your values, and you end up with 60.
Oh yeah.
when one word could just umbrella all of it.
This is also why you can't start a coaching program with, what do you think your purpose is in life? You can ask them other things about their opinions about life and the world, but you're not really going to get very far.
Well, and it's important to understand context too. If you just met someone at a party, don't be like, hey, let's unlearn you. Tell me. Just like, what was the first wound you experienced? What was the first time you were abandoned? You know,
wait, you're saying you're not supposed to ask those things at parties?
Well, unless you're weirdos like you and I.
Yeah, exactly.
Who stole your power? Hi, my name's Greg. First of all. Beautiful, man. Well, dude, I'm grateful for this time. This has been just so fun. I can't believe it's taken this long to have you on this rendition of the show. Now that I and you have come to an awareness that you played a necessary role in it becoming real. So I guess we have to have you come back on at some point to talk about something else. But first things first, man, like before we get into how we can find out more about your coaching and get in touch with you and your podcast, what is something that you want to leave or land with our guests right now based on the conversation we've just had?
Three little things. I should say 3 simplified things. 1, the answer or the truth is actually simpler than you think it is, especially about what you're supposed to do with your life. Number 2, continually ask what is really going on. What is real? The reality testing bit. Like, what are you actually afraid of, stressed about? What's in your control? What's not? Just keep evaluating your reality. And then number 3, no matter where you're at, whether you're at your crisis threshold, tipping point, or you're starting to feel like a change needs to be made, or you just like self-development, find a way to enjoy it. It's just a play. It's just playing around. We're expanding reality. Reality is just moldable. It's Play-Doh. So find a way to have fun molding that Play-Doh.
Beautifully said, man. Beautifully said. Oh gosh, I started this day with the eyes and nose full of pollen and very little energy, and just hoping I could get through this interview, knowing we'd have some fun. And I'm coming out the other side just 10 out of 10 energy, inspired, emotionally alive. So I hope you, the listener, if you had a fraction of that from listening to this episode, that's amazing. So Taylor, thank you for that gift. How can we find out more about you, follow your journey, podcast, all the rest? Take it away.
All right. Well, firstly, thank you also, Brandon. Thank you for what you said about me somehow playing a part in this happening. That just means so much. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. So very simple ways. The www.thetailoredquill.com. tailored like a suit. I also have a podcast that's called The Tailored Quill, where I do little short episodes of myself talking through tips and insights and perspectives, as well as have guests on. And that would probably be the best place. So through the website, you can get in touch with me. I'm very responsive over email, and on the website, you can also schedule a free session with me as well. So even if you aren't ready for a full commitment to coaching, or you're just trying to figure out who you want to work with or what you need to work on, all are welcome. You still have that free session. It's open to everybody, especially all of your listeners.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, and all of those will be linked in the show notes. So if you want to find those links, head to wherever you get your podcast, whatever you're listening to right now, you will see them there. Beautiful, mate. Well, for those of you joining us today, thank you again for your continued support of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. And I believe we have done that today, Taylor, don't you think?
I think so.
Yeah, I know so.
There's got to be something in there that somebody can use.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of swill that we just kind of just spat out.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, again, thank you for your continued support, and we will see you next week. Lots of love. See you then. Well, there you have it. Another powerful episode of the Mankind Podcast with Taylor Wilkins. Re-listening to this episode and editing it over the past hour has been so enjoyable for me to highlight and acknowledge these little gems that came out through my conversation with him. And honestly, whether it's through Marco Polo or whether it's through just on the phone, Taylor and I this is where I believe the depth of our friendship comes from, is because these are the conversations we have all the time. No surface level stuff. Like, we really just get down and deep and chat life stuff. Man, life is not smooth sailings. Yet when I have a friend like Taylor in my corner, it's almost like I've gone from trying to avoid difficult challenges and struggles in life to embracing them and embracing the storm that comes with them, because every single instance, every single moment, every single occurrence, Taylor is there to remind me that, hey, what is the purpose of this? Why is this happening? And what can you learn about it? And what can you do about it? He just frames things so well. And I love that we kind of rounded this episode on, this isn't rocket science. It really is simple. Sure, each of us has so much nuance to our lives, so many experiences. No one can truly walk in my shoes or your shoes. However, this unlearning of an old narrative and story that no longer serves, the rewriting of that story of what we know to be true about us today, and then setting sail and taking on the journey going forward with this new awareness of who we are as individuals, it really is an enjoyable, fulfilling, and fun process when looking at it through the right lens. So for those of you out there that may be feeling like you're standing at the metaphorical mountain, looking at the top, wondering, how on earth am I going to get to the top and achieve whatever those goals are that you're hoping to achieve? Through this process, and what I found through my experience with Taylor as a friend and hiring him as a coach, is that most of those mountains are molehills. And in fact, I'm a mountain climber. I've climbed mountains my whole life. And to remind myself that there are so many mountains that I've crushed that are so much bigger than this one that I'm currently looking at. So let's have fun with it. Let's learn through the challenge, through the struggle, and through doing this tough stuff, doing the work, getting that PhD in you. That's where true fulfillment and enjoyment comes from. So when I know the stories that are at play, whether they're true or complete BS, when I know them and I'm aware of them, it informs so much more of my life and my journey going forward, and how I take each step and how I turn up as Brandon Clift. So if you want to find out more about Taylor Wilkins, I strongly recommend take him up on a free coaching session. He is not expecting you at the end of that session to pull out your wallet and hire him unless it is truly something of value. So this isn't a tripwire. He genuinely just loves spending time with people, helping them unpack their stories and write new narratives. So you truly have nothing at risk here except time when you book that free session with him. You can find links to that in the show notes. Otherwise, head to thetailoredquill.com where you'll be able to find all the links. Also in the show notes, you'll see links to his podcast, the Taylor Quill podcast, as well as 2 little extra bonuses here. Taylor's free roadmap to fulfillment, which is his free ebook, as well as his mini course, The 3 Keys to Psychological Freedom. But above all else, book a call. You will not regret it. It will be the best time you've spent this year. Trust me. Well, that's all for me today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Mankind Podcast. Special thanks goes to our guest today, Taylor Wilkins. And above all else, special thanks goes to you, the listener, because none of this would be possible if it weren't for you turning up each and every week, sharing your feedback, sharing your ideas, recommending guests, recommending topics. We truly love your feedback. So please, if you feel compelled and called to have your voice heard for this show, shoot me an email at brandon@brandonclift.com. And if you would like to leave us a review or rating on iTunes, you will see a link as well in the show notes to do so. We really appreciate your feedback, and those rating and reviews make it possible for us to reach more people out there in the world on the interwebs. In fact, I have a review from Davey T, who says, I wish there were more podcasts on this topic with this approach, having a balanced and thoughtful view on manhood. There are plenty of views, opinions, and experiences from reputable guests. Thank you, Brandon and the team. I'm hooked and following closely. So if you want to hear your words and your feedback reflected on this show, please head to the link in the show notes where you'll be able to head to iTunes and leave us a review. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.